I'm Owen Spedding, Manager of Bureau Alliances at VantageScore. Thank you for joining us today. This webinar is specifically geared towards supporting lenders through changes that are occurring in the conforming mortgage space, whether you are a mortgage lender yourself or for anyone who needs to keep abreast of the changes. VantageScore was launched in 2006, and we've created 4 models since the company began. Early on, we saw adoption in all areas where credit scores were used, adoption that has continued to grow year on year. But one area where we were not able to expand was the mortgage space, and that was not due to performance or any other factor, but specifically due to regulatory rules that fixed FICO Classic as a requirement for government-backed mortgages. This was more inertia than active choice on the part of the regulators, but thankfully that began to change in 2022 when the FHFA announced that VantageScore 4.0 would be a requirement for mortgages. The process for including VantageScore 4.0 in mortgage underwriting is underway, and our presenter, Tony Hutchinson, will give a full accounting of that. We want to ensure lenders are informed about the changes, as well as the direct use of VantageScore to onboard new GSE-backed mortgages. Lenders that issue mortgages and other products, like most banks, credit unions, and numerous fintechs, have options too. These lenders are facing a shift in one side of their business, and this creates an opportunity to evaluate the credit score used in the other side of their business. Our presenter today is Tony Hutchinson, Senior Vice President of Industry and Government Relations at VantageScore. He brings nearly 30 years' experience and a wealth of knowledge about the inner workings of Congress and the executive branch, as well as a deep understanding of the housing industry. Prior to joining VantageScore, Anthony was the Director of Government Industry Relations at Freddie Mac. Also, I'll just advise you that we have the Q&A function turned on for this webinar. And if you have any questions, please enter them there, and I'll ask Tony at the end of his presentation. So I'll hand over to Tony to provide you with an overview of what is happening in the mortgage credit score space. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Appreciate the introduction. And thank you to everyone for joining us today to discuss FHFA's initiative to update the credit score model in the conventional conforming mortgage market, the market that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac participate in. This is going to be the first of a number of sessions that we're going to do over the next couple of months. As information comes out from FHFA via some of the activities that I will talk about a little bit later, we are going to have webinars like this so that we can make sure everyone in the mortgage market is informed. Owen, if you can start the slides, please.
Certainly can.
Thank you. Over the next 40 minutes, I will walk through the actions that FHFA, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, has taken since it announced their intentions to upgrade the credit score models in October of last year, including reviewing where we are on the timeline for implementation. I will share comments from the halls of Congress on FHFA's efforts in this space. I will show the impact of moving to VantageScore 4.0 in the market and how that will impact the market space. And finally, I will share ideas for working with VantageScore to help your organization prepare for upcoming changes right before we open everything up to questions. And I'll just reiterate what Owen mentioned earlier, that the Q&A functionality is open. If you have questions, please put them in during the conversation. We will try to answer them as I go, but we will definitely answer them towards the end, and we'll try to get as many questions in as possible. I appreciate your patience, but please feel free to add the questions as we go. So as I mentioned, last October, FHFA completed the work authorized by the Bipartisan Credit Score Competition Act that was signed into law in 2018. As part of the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act of 2018, Section 310 established requirements for the use of third-party credit scoring models by the enterprises. Effectively, the law asked FHFA to begin the process of determining if other credit score models could be utilized in the mortgage marketplace. The announcement they made in October of 2022 was the culmination of their work. And in that work, they decided that both VantageScore 4.0 and FICO 10T would be utilized in the mortgage market space, for loans sold to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Next slide, please. The rationale for the mandate to update the credit scoring models was twofold. First, Congress and FHFA want to take steps to improve the safety and soundness of the GSEs, the government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That has been a large focus of FHFA's and the GSE's efforts since the entities began recovery coming out of the Great Recession. The second thing that FHFA wanted to do was provide tools that would contribute to the GSE's mission to expand inclusion in homeownership. The new credit scoring models, in particular VantageScore 4.0, with its ability to score consumers using less trade lines, because it incorporates more consumer information. This is when we talk about alternative credit. So for instance, rental, utility, and telecom payments when they're in the credit file. And also it reviews people over a 24-month period as opposed to one point in time. These methods open up the opportunity to score more people whom to this point in the mortgage market have been unscored and excluded. Makes sense. With that mandate, FHFA embarked on the first phase of the implementation process, which came to an end this September. During that phase, FHFA and the GSEs provided resources to educate the market about the upcoming change and the need for it. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac produced playbooks that outlined the projects they were working on to move implementation forward, as well as created FAQs to help the industry be on the same footing as them. Finally, they received comments from over 1,000 industry participants discussing concerns about the project. Lastly, they created a timeline for the implementation of the credit scoring models. In lockstep with what FHFA was doing, VantageScore has also developed a mortgage page that has FAQs about VantageScore 4.0, the score that will be used in the mortgage market. Lenders and all those interested in VantageScore's participation in this space should take a look at that page. It includes a playbook for migrating VantageScore into your systems. It also includes information related to some of the things that we're talking about here, but also related to why VantageScore was deemed necessary in the mortgage marketplace. Just gives you updated information that you can use to get a better grasp on VantageScore 4.0 so that you can begin to easily implement it into your systems and understand the rationale that FHFA utilized when making the decision to move to this score at the end of 2025. Next slide, please. Like I said, the work in phase one came to a completion in September of this year, and now we're embarking upon phase two. During that phase, FHFA and the GSEs are planning discussion groups where industry participants have the opportunity to come and chime in on issues related to the implementation of the new credit scores. These discussions will kick off November 8th. And for some of you, if you have already signed up, you've gotten a notification. Any mortgage market participant can participate in these discussions. In order to sign up, you just need to go to creditscores.org at FHFA, and you will be able to sign up to participate in the upcoming sessions. Beginning November 8th, there will be 4 sessions. 2 sessions will focus on issues related to problems or obstacles with the implementation of the new credit scores. In those discussions, we will only be discussing the implementation. There will be no relitigation of whether or not it is necessary to utilize the scores at all or update the scores, but more focused on getting the work done so that implementation will continue. Two of the other meetings are going to be focused on the historical data sets that the industry has asked for. Some of the questions that are going to be answered there are, how does the data need to be transmitted to the industry? How much information? Over how long of a period of time? Those are questions that the sessions held to focus on that are going to focus on. Again, if you are interested in participating in those discussions, you should reach out to FHFA. They are still looking for industry participants. They have indicated that they want as many folks to participate in these discussions as possible, so that when they begin the implementation process in earnest, meaning asking people to start to download the scores, there will be no excuses for folks in the mortgage market, because they would have participated, shared their issues, and together we would have solved the problems that many have had identified to prevent potential implementation. Next slide, please. So this, we're going to recap and just take a look at where we are in the current timeline. So in 2023, we have a 3-year timeline here from the announcement at the end of 2022, beginning 2023, going through full implementation in 2025. So far, we have completed the issues in quarters 2 and 3. Industry feedback has been received by FHFA and considered. And stakeholder engagements, this additional deep dive that I was just mentioning, has kicked off at the end of the 3rd quarter and is going to progress through quarter 4. The only piece that has been delayed are rules and information related to the promulgation, or I'm sorry, rules and information related to the tri-merge, bi-merge regime. There was historical data and information related to how you would utilize new data in a bi-merge regime versus a tri-merge that was due at the end of the 1st quarter. However, that has been delayed because conversations related to that are just kicking off this month. FHFA has indicated that the delay is only because they are awaiting additional information from the industry regarding solutions for the utilization of a bi-merge instead of a tri-merge regime. But the one thing that they have indicated, and they continue to stipulate to all market participants, is that the implementation of the new credit score models and the implementation of the bi-merge model from a tri-merge regime are separate and distinct, meaning that the new credit score model implementation can go ahead without the need for the tri-merge or bi-merge to be implemented at the same time. Indeed, the conversations that will be had during these discussion groups that I've just mentioned is going to talk about the timing, what needs to be done first, how it needs to be done, and where, if you wanted to bring the new regime on the credit reporting side in, where it would fall. But again, the process is going to continue and it's going to start, and no delay on that has been indicated. In 2024, the biggest milestone that I will indicate comes in quarter 3. And that is when the industry right now is slated to pull the new credit scoring models, VantageScore 4.0 and FICO 10T, with the traditional score that is utilized in the mortgage market. So you heard me correctly. We will be pulling 3 different sets of scores for a certain period of time, beginning 3rd quarter of 2024. A lot of this is related to determining if folks are able to get the scores into their systems. So your internal plumbing, get the scores from your third-party providers and or the credit reporting companies directly. and then have the ability to transmit them to the GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. This test period is due to last until the next big milestone related to the credit score model update, and that's the fourth quarter of 2025. It is at that point that the traditional score will go away and the new credit score models will continue to be utilized. So there's about a year period beginning in third quarter of 2024 where the industry will need to start pulling the scores, testing them internally to ensure their systems are up and running, and get those scores over to the GSEs. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, FHFA is moving full steam ahead. There has been a number of discussions out there about potential delay. I'm here to inform you that those discussions or that information to this point is not founded in any of the discussions that FHFA has had. One of the things that they have indicated is that if impediments are found and the industry decides that as part of the solution, it may take longer to implement new scores, then that will be considered at that time. But no delay is going to be forthcoming prior to beginning the actual implementation process. They are planning to take a path similar to the transition from LIBOR to SOFR in both the way they are planning to implement the new scores and the way that they plan to engage the industry. So continuing conversations all the way through so that everyone has a say, that every problem or obstacle that occurs is worked on collectively by the industry, and collectively we make decisions towards the final implementation, trying at best to adhere to the timeline as laid out. And part of the reason that they're doing this is because there has been some questioning and some, shall I say, positive feedback given to them from Congress. Next slide, please. Earlier this year, a number of members from the House Financial Services Committee sent a letter to FHFA applauding Director Thompson and the agency for their efforts to improve the safety and soundness of the GSEs, but more importantly, expand inclusion of consumers to have an opportunity with home ownership. The letter was signed by 2 congressional Democrats and 2 congressional Republicans on the House Financial Services Committee. The Democrats are Representatives Peterson and Gonzalez from Colorado and Texas, respectively, and congressional Republicans Kim and Nunn from California and Iowa, respectively. Each represents markets where a number of their constituents are outside of the mortgage market because they have not been scored, either because they are minorities or underserved communities or rural communities. Each is extremely interested in ensuring that their constituents have an opportunity, if they are creditworthy, to participate in the housing market. And they believe that the steps that FHFA is taking because of the mandate from the Fair Credit Score Reporting Act, that their constituents will get that fair shake. So they appreciate the efforts that FHFA and its director are taking. And they also ask that they continue to meet the timeline so that these changes can reach their constituents in a relatively short period of time. And it's interesting that we say relatively short period of time because that legislation was signed 5 years ago. And we're talking about completion of the implementation process a couple of years from now, meaning that the entire process would have taken 8 years. Next slide, please. But the House Financial Service, and this is the letter that they signed. Just wanted to share that FHFA director, in her response to them, thanked them for their support, but more importantly, said that FHFA was going to do everything that it could to adhere to the timeline. Next slide, please. Interestingly enough, not to be outdone, members of the Senate Banking Committee, led by Senate Banking Committee ranking member Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, and some of you may know that he is also a candidate for the presidency of the United States, sent a letter to FHFA reminding them of their mandate to implement the new credit score. But more importantly, stressing urgency and beating the timeline and implementing credit score. He was joined by 7 of his Senate banking members, Senators Kramer, Crapo, Daines, Haggerty, Kennedy, Rounds, and Tillis, on this letter that went that went to FHFA director in October of this year. You may go to the next slide. The thing that was very interesting about this is in their letter, the senators indicated that implementing this update provides an opportunity to make the credit scoring models our housing market relies on more fair and accurate. Again, getting at the safety and soundness piece, but also focusing on the ability to expand inclusion in home ownership. It was also stressed that these actions did not lower standards needed to qualify for a mortgage. And because of that, it was critical that FHFA adhered to the timeline and implemented these scores as soon as possible. Safety and soundness is a key that has been driving a lot of the activity that FHFA has done. Inclusion is also another piece, but safety and soundness of the GSEs to protect the secondary mortgage market has been top of mind for both Congress and FHFA as they move forward. The next piece is financial inclusion. Next slide, please. Safety and soundness of the system is self-explanatory, but what does expanded inclusion through the use of the new credit scores mean? For VantageScore 4.0, it means scoring 33 million more consumers than the traditional score used for the mortgage market. Within that 33 million more scored consumers, 13 million have a credit score of 620, which makes them eligible for some type of mortgage products. Additional analysis that we have conducted, filtering for consumers in the home buying age 25 to 65 and meeting housing affordability criteria, VantageScore estimates that the market could see 2.7 million more households able to become homeowners. That translates into approximately $1 trillion of mortgage market opportunity. Moreover, a significant number of these households, 1.9 million, are minority. Now, how will these scores help with financial inclusion? Well, in particular, for VantageScore 4.0, the score provides 33 million more consumers with a score. That gets us to a 94% scored populace in the country. Because it scores more people, it also captures a lot of folks who have been marginalized in the past, meaning underserved markets that are in the rural, underserved markets that are minority in focus. So part of the reason that we have brought you all together is because we want to talk about how VantageScore can help you become more familiar with the product in practical terms. We are available to work with you to pilot VantageScore 4.0 right now in your shops. Again, Q3 of 2024 is when the GSEs are going to mandate that people begin delivering the new scores alongside the traditional score that's in the marketplace. But before that happens, every player in the market is going to need to ensure that their systems can handle the new scores that are out there, not just handle bringing them in, but transmitting them out. You're going to also have to understand, if you do any analytics in-house, how the scores correlate to the traditional ones, so you can build out your models and understand your risk models. You may also want to begin to gauge the potential size of the opportunity that lies before you when you implement the new scores, meaning that when you originate a mortgage, maybe someone, based on the traditional score, was deemed not eligible. However, the new scores may deem them eligible. And the interesting thing is, vice versa occurs as well. You may want to get a very good handle on that. So, VantageScore would like to work with you in a number of ways. First, if folks are interested at really gauging what the opportunity is that the new scores provide, you can score at origination, and we will work with you to bring in VantageScore 4.0 at the origination point. So as you are beginning to pre-qual consumers, or after you have decided that you are going to make them an offer, you can now see, you can append a VantageScore to that and begin to monitor it through the process. So you can see how VantageScore 4.0 will perform in relation to the traditional score. If you have existing portfolios, and this really gets to the special purpose credit program, where a lot of folks are bringing in loans under that, but are not utilizing credit scores to qualify folks, consumers. Maybe there's an opportunity there, or I want to say maybe there's an opportunity there. Maybe what you want to do is begin to monitor the performance of those consumers. One of the ways that you can gain practical knowledge of the new scores, in particular VantageScore 4.0, is to append, after you've originated the mortgage, VantageScore 4.0 to your special purpose credit program or some non-conforming loan program that you may have in the market space, where in your portfolio, that you're not selling off to the GSEs. Refresh that on a monthly basis to understand performance, to be able to see early warnings, to understand VantageScore 4.0's predictive power, so that you can protect the portfolio that you have in place. And then lastly, for a lot of the shops out there, and this would be more for the bigger shops, specifically the lenders that have large portfolios, but are also doing a risk management function before they sell outside of the GSEs, you may want to do some level of analysis to determine how VantageScore 4.0 correlates to the traditional score that you use in your models, and then begin to adjust those models so that you're ready day one when the marketplace begins to accept the new models. So I've talked to you for about 30 minutes, and we have approximately 10 to 15 minutes left. I know we have a few questions that had already come in, and we'll answer those. And then if there are other questions that have come in, we'll work to answer those. But I want to reiterate to everybody on the phone that we are here to help you. We want to assist and partner with you in this endeavor to upgrade the scores. And as part of that, we're going to do these discussions monthly through the end of the year, and then we'll do them probably quarterly as information comes out beginning early 2024. There have been a lot of moving parts. FHFA has made a lot of changes and taken a lot of actions over the last couple of months, and we're going to see more of that momentum continue, specifically with the discussion groups that are kicking off again on November 8th. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention, and I will turn it over to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have a few questions. The first question is, you mentioned FHFA adhering to the existing timeline, but I continue to hear people in the industry talk about the implementation being delayed. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So a lot of people continue to hear, a a lot of people continue to hear conflicting information related to the timeline and whether or not things are going to be delayed. Like I mentioned earlier, the only item that has been delayed to this point is or are the rules that the GSEs are supposed to promulgate related to the use of the tri-merge, bi-merge, and the historical data. That information was supposed to come out fourth quarter of this year, and it looks like that information is now going to come out sometime early next year. But we will have a better determination after these discussion groups begin this month.
Okay. Second question is, how do I or my company share our perspectives on the implementation with FHFA and the GSEs?
So FHFA and the GSEs have made it clear that they want. Are you getting feedback?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just getting a little bit. FHFA and the GSEs have made it clear that they want as much information from the market participants as they possibly can get. And they are making it available. They've developed conduits for that transmission of information in a number of ways. You can reach out to both GSEs directly. If you go, they have pages that are specifically set up, focused on the new rule implementation for credit scores, as well as the tri-merge to bi-merge. Those pages, you can reach out to both GSE teams with concerns and solutions. FHFA has set up the exact same thing with a page dedicated to it. And again, they're asking people to sign up for these discussions. So please go out and sign up for the discussions via FHFA's website. It is, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it's FHFAcreditscore.org. But you may want to go, I would say, go to the website, do a search on credit scores, and you will get a link to the page where you can, one, sign up to participate in the upcoming meetings and get notifications of any changes in other meetings on the way.
Okay. I got a question from the FAQ. Has the FHFA suggest that lenders will be averaging scores in the process of developing a representative score in the bi-merge? Are VantageScore's results compatible with averaging? Does the average score maintain the same predictive validity?
So that's a good question. Right now, everyone is working to determine how the scores should be handled in a bi-merge regime. The first thing I will note is that moving to the bi-merge is not mandatory. It is an option. It is optional. So if you decide that you continue to want to use the tri-merge, meaning that you would pull the third score and submit it, then you can. The other thing that FHFA has indicated is if you do happen to pull all three, you cannot select two, you have to submit all three. However, if you do decide to pull two, we are still looking into how the averages will work. You can average Vantage scores but you cannot average a Vantage score with another score. And that's the one thing that people are pretty interested in. How you come up with the remedy codes that are utilized, again, those are things to be determined. The GSEs and FHFA, along with the industry, including VantageScore and our friends over at Fair Isaacs, are working to figure out how you do that. But just as a quick aside, it is optional to do that unless you want to. But the rules for that, we're still working on.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Have you heard any feedback regarding whether or not FHA, VA, and USDA will adopt the new credit approach?
So we have not heard any definitives. So I cannot say that they will for sure. But what I will tell you is they normally follow suit of the GSEs. And the reason being is because they utilize the AUS, the automated underwriting systems of the GSEs, to also process a lot of the FHA, VA, and USDA loans that go through those programs into Ginnie Mae. Each one of those entities has indicated that they are working with FHFA, and FHFA has indicated that they are working with them. One, to keep them abreast of where we are, so that as the implementation moves further down the field and gets closer to day one, that all of those entities can prepare to participate as well. Like I said, there's been no definitives. A lot of people in the industry believe that those organizations will follow, so the government will follow, but to this point, they have not made a definitive statement.
Okay, thank you. Someone has asked the question about us restating the website that can be discussed.
What are the discussion groups?
The FHFA one. So maybe what we can do is confirm and drop an email to attendees.
I'll do that, but I will tell you, the first place to go is FHFA.gov. If you go to FHFA.gov and do a search on credit scores, it will take you to the page that has all of their information related to all of the announcements that they have made so far about credit scores and the update. But more importantly, there is an email that you can submit your name, your title, your company's name to be, and your email address, obviously. I apologize for not putting that in there. So that you can be added to the discussion groups. And what you're going to get is a notification that says there are discussions coming up on this date and the next date, and you can pick the ones that you want to participate in, or you can participate in all of them. But these are going to be groups that get together to discuss issues for implementation, and more importantly, discuss solutions.
Okay, great. So I've got one more question, which is, how do we square the idea that the new models will open opportunities for folks who would have scored lower with the traditional credit model? How do you square that with the FHFA's assertion that the data shows little difference in scoring current consumers, and as a result, there is no need to adjust eligibility frameworks?
So the one thing that we said is, these scores are not going to change credit quality for consumers. What it's going to do is provide scores for a number of folks who have not had a score to this point. Some of those people are going to have very low scores. So just because they're scored does not mean they're credit worthy in the mortgage market. So the standards established by the GSEs, which are promulgated to the mortgage market, are going to be consistent. But again, more people are going to understand or have the ability to know where they are on the credit score continuum, so they can make now decisions about how they want to improve their score so that they can participate in the mortgage market, either get improve their credit so they get better pricing, or improve their credit so that they can participate, meaning that they might be below 620. The other thing is, the score, like I said, the scores, they're not just going to score people who had very low scores. There's a large swath of folks who are well above a 660 or 680 that are going to be scored. So these are people who would have been invisible, save for making continual utility payments and using some other things that are on their credit reporting that we can now see and that we can now measure over an extended period of time. We can now tell that these folks have the ability to repay in the mortgage space, or the ability to repay just in general, and their scores are going to be higher. So because of that, you're going to get people who are very well qualified, who to this point were invisible, who can participate. So it's not just about folks in these spaces who don't have a score being less than qualified. The scores are opening the window for people who are qualified, who just were not scored to this point.
Thank you. I've got a few more questions as you've been talking. In a bi-merge scenario, how does that play with the GSE's undisclosed debt policy?
That I cannot answer because I do not know. That is a question that I will take back to the GSEs. That is a pretty interesting one. I have not contemplated that, but that is one I will take back to FHFA and both GSEs. And if the individual who posted that would like to reach out to me individually, I will give you all my email address now as we begin to get towards the end, and we can continue to have a discussion about that. And I will share what information I find. So with that, I will share my email address. It is simply Tony, and get this, no last name, at VantageScore.com. As simple as that, Tony at VantageScore.com. For anybody on the call, if you have questions, if you want more updates about what's going on with FHFA or what folks on Congress are saying, or even just to talk about VantageScore in general, and how we can help you implement potential pilots so that you can get a better, a practical knowledge of how the score correlates with things with the score that you're currently using, please feel free to reach out. Again, we're here to be your partner in this endeavor.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony. And thank you everyone for joining. I hope you found this webinar informative. We'll be posting a recording of the webinar on the website, so you can refer any colleagues who are interested to the events section of our site. And if you have any further questions, like Tony said, you could email him at tony@vantagescore.com. Other than that, thank you very much everyone for joining, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.